Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you all had an enjoyable and refreshing lunch break. I hope you all had great conversations with each other. As we reconvene, we return our attention to the topic of paramount importance in today's world, the ESG. This panel promises a deep dive into sustainable practices and strategy crucial for our future. Kicking off this session, we are privileged to have Professor Graciela Chichilnisky, a trailblazer in the field of sustainable development. Professor Chichilnisky, CEO of Anthrocene, advisor, and co-founder of Global Thermostat, has been a pioneering force in creating sustainable market mechanism and is renowned for her work with the United Nations in developing the carbon market framework. She will be delivering a keynote speech entitled Towards a Robust and Sustainable Future, Pricing Climate Risk and Financing Climate Resilient Solutions. Her insights are bound to provide us with profound understanding of the challenges and opportunities in achieving a sustainable future. Please welcome.
Hello. I just realized I was applauding to myself. So I decided to come and talk to regularize the situation. It's a pleasure to be here today, a real pleasure. Very interesting people and very interesting topics. I think what I need to talk about is where are we at with climate change and what do we have to do now? How and why? So I'm going to just start on that head on to tell you that we have gone after many, many years of the Convention of the Parties, which is the group of now 200 nations. COP 28 just happened in Dubai. We were able to finally come up with a decision and unanimous agreement to phase out fossil fuels. It seems absolutely extraordinary that it has taken so much time. And in fact, the decision was made under the presidence of Sultan Al Jaber, who is the head of the largest oil company in the world. It's all full of riddles, it's the whole situation. So is there anything in all this that we can say is going to make a difference? After all, even though the phasing out of fossil fuels has been agreed, 7 weeks ago in Dubai by the Convention of the Parties number 28, the 200 nations, there has been a period decided for that transition, which is 30 years. So it's a riddle. It's unbelievable that we are still in this situation, and even within the rationality of phasing out fossil fuels, we have the irrationality of a 30-year period to do something like that. So, is there anything else that can be done? Are we making progress, as I said before, with phasing out fossil fuels? That we are. But can we measure that? Can we say something concrete about it? And can we give examples about it? I have a number of articles, which is, I think, maybe about enough for half of the people in this room, or maybe more. You have them there? Yes. So they are about water and climate change, and I will explain why that matters. It was just published in the magazine called Smart Water, which is the magazine of the water producers in the world. And you will say, what does it have to do with climate change? So let me just say that very briefly, and then I will go to what can be done realistically and will be done to a certain extent. We're going to discuss that. So why water? As you probably know, the United Nations has found that 2 billion people out of the 8 billion in the planet don't have sufficient clean water to drink. And water is a basic need, which means either you drink water or you die in a few days. So this is not complicated. That's what I call a basic need. It's needed for survival, okay? So 2 out of the 8 billion people don't have enough of this water to survive. In fact, just to be more precise, the entire area of, the area that we were just talking about, the Far East, requires desalination of water in order to provide enough to drink. So all of these countries are without enough water and depend on desalinating water from the ocean in order to produce the water that they need to drink to survive. This situation has a silver lining, and that's what the article that I will distribute at the end, that summarizes what I'm telling you right now, will explain to you. It's a silver lining because the more dire is the water situation, the more desalination is needed for people to have enough water to drink to survive, the more it is possible to reduce the CO2 in the atmosphere. And the reason is that the process of water desalination by itself removes CO2 from the atmosphere. So this is a recently discovered fact, but it's a very important fact. It means that if a certain area has not enough water to provide to its people, it will have to desalinate water. It's the only way that we have to produce drinkable water, produce it from the ocean, and desalinate it, because if we drink water from the ocean, we die. So we need to desalinate it. The finding is that the desalination of water removes CO2 from the atmosphere. I can explain that, but it is in the article that I will circulate after that. So I would prefer that you read the article, which is only 2 pages long. And I will circulate afterwards. So the reason there is a silver lining is because the more the water crisis proceeds, the more likely we are to contribute to the removal of CO2, which is what is needed for climate change. That's what I call a silver lining. There is a silver lining in the production of water needed for human consumption right now. That article that will be circulated is partly technological and is partly business. And I want to emphasize this issue. It's partly technological because you need to understand how CO2 contributes to desalinating water and why. And then, once you have done that, you start realizing that the reason it works is because water desalination not only is the only way that we can provide water to the human beings that are without that basic human need, but in addition, it makes money. And when you start looking into the problem and you start realizing it makes money, then you see, well, maybe then it will happen because somebody has the incentive to provide that desalinating water. And that is the silver lining I was referring to. Indeed, some of the largest companies in the world have desalinating plants, and those plants make a lot of money. And in fact, they build desalination plants, which are normally hundreds of millions of dollars worth of technology that takes water from the ocean and uses it to produce drinkable water. So if we try to drink salt water, we die. If we instead desalinate it, we can make money and contribute to remove the CO2, which is causing climate change. Is that clear? So I'm not going to beat this over the head by repeating it, but if you read the article, you will see what I'm talking about, and I'm, of course, very happy to answer questions. It is a very interesting coincidence of commercial incentives and incentives for basic needs, which is in this case the provision of water. It is even needed in the United States now because of the situation with the Colorado River that was providing water to 5 states in the West and is no longer able to do so because it has been extracted, the water from the Colorado River. Now, this just goes over the topic of water and climate change. Now, you may want to know from somebody like me who was in Kyoto in the year 1997 and provided the proposal to the Convention of the Parties number 2 for the creation of the carbon market of the Kyoto Protocol, which is the only mandatory agreement to reduce emissions of CO2 that exists now, even now. I provided that proposal to the CO2, which COP2, the Convention of the Parties number 2, and it was voted into law in the year 2005. It was voted first in the Convention of the Parties in 1997, and it became law in the year 2005. In the year 2005, that became the foundation for the European Union emission trading system, the simple regulation which I introduced. That carbon market is as I repeat, is the only mandatory law that we have, even now, for removing CO2 or for diminishing the emissions of CO2. Some people ask, but do we need a mandatory law for that? Or is it enough to have goodwill? The answer is, goodwill is always good, of course, but it doesn't suffice. So even the New York Times has published articles recently on the issue that what we need for climate change is a well-functioning carbon market. We cannot have a carbon market without mandatory reductions. First, in emissions, which is what the carbon market of the Kyoto Protocol that I introduced did, and then not just for the market, but also for removing the CO2 that is already in the atmosphere, which is much more serious. The market is based on limiting emissions. That's the flow. Now, limiting emissions is not enough. We have to look at the entire quantity of CO2, and the Intergovernmental Panel of Climate Change has given us a number that was ratified by the US National Academy of Sciences. And sorry. That number is 500 gigaton actually 550 gigaton of CO2 must be removed from the atmosphere now because we have emitted so much. We have over-emitted, going beyond what could cause climate change. So the National Academy of Sciences in the US, and which is not a UN organization, incidentally, it's a bona fide US organization, and the Intergovernmental Panel of Climate Change, which is the international authority on this issue, both have published reports saying that right now the only way to stop or even to reverse climate change is to remove CO2 from the atmosphere. Coincidentally, well, actually not coincidentally, but during the Biden administration, there have been 2 laws that have been passed. And please think about this for a second. Without laws, we're not going to get people to do what's necessary because the emission of CO2 comes together with the production of energy and a few things that people are not going to voluntarily stop doing, like driving a car or heating a home. So right now, the amount of CO2 that has to be removed from the atmosphere is 550 gigaton of CO2, where a gigaton is the number 1 followed by 14 zeros. So millions of millions. I want you to understand that. It's a huge amount. It's a big number. Is it possible? As I said before, there are possibilities. And in fact, they have been explored in a movie, short movie, that was done a few years ago, not many. And in that movie, we explain what are all the activities that we can exploit that will remove CO2 from the atmosphere. That's usually, is usually done in the production, the CO2 is usually involved in the production of energy, so it's all over the place. That movie is called Carbon Negative, and I'm happy to send it to you. I will ask that you give me your name and an email, and I will send you that very highly educational video, but apparently it's entertaining too, and it's short. The best part of it is that it's short. So here we go. It is possible during the production of our economic system to reduce the CO2. Is it possible to reduce it by 550 gigaton as it is needed according to the National Academy and the IPCC? Yes, it is possible. Is it likely? I don't know. It's touch and go. It's very close. The quantities needed are enormous. What can we do when there is the need for something so important as what is now going to be reversing climate change, because it's already starting to happen? And we don't have a criterion. We don't know how to do it right now. Well, we do to a certain extent. And that's what I wanted to talk next, and that will, I hope, finish everything I have to say on this today, because my throat is not going to stand up, I don't think. It is possible to reduce the CO2 that we need to reverse climate change, which is already happening. Climate change is already happening, according to scientists. What we have to do is, number one, have a measurement of what is required and then implement that. Implement the removal for that measurement. How can this be done? Well, I gave you one example, water. To the extent that we produce desalinated water, we are removing CO2 from the atmosphere. Can we remove enough CO2 by desalinating water? Not right now, but perhaps soon. So the numbers are in the article that I will circulate, and that's an important consideration because we do want to produce more drinkable water, and we can. But there is a number of ways. Which number of ways? They are listed and illustrated in that short video that I mentioned. It's a movie. It was produced by an awarded filmmaker. So I will circulate that to anybody who gives me their email address. I will send you the short movie that explains the various ways in which CO2 can be removed as needed to reverse climate change. Now, you will ask, there are technologies that can do that. Well, you're looking at the person that invented one of these technologies. That technology is called direct air capture. It means that you can remove, you seem to know about it, it means that you can remove the CO2 directly from the air. I actually patented that, and I did it as part of my role in a company that I created and was developing and is developed that technology. The company is called Global Thermostat, and you can find out more by reading about it. So it is possible to remove CO2 from the atmosphere, but it's expensive. So the reason, what I said before, is a silver lining is because through the production of water, you can generate enough profit so that the removal of the CO2 that water desalination implies becomes a profitable activity. And we know that there is nothing better and faster than human greed to get things done. Greed, G-R-E-E-D, just to be clear what I'm saying here. So it is possible to do this. So the question is how to accelerate it, though, because the risks are enormous. And the answer is it can be accelerated provided there is enough funding to encourage people and to allow people to remove the CO2. It is profitable, but barely so. It's totally new. So we need funding for that. You will say, there is funding. There is in ESG activities. It is known that there are approximately 4 trillion, with T as in $4 trillion worth of dry powder, which means decisions that people have made to invest through private investment that have not happened yet. So there are people who want to do it, but they haven't done it. You say, why haven't they done it? Answer, they don't know what are the instruments to do it. So I ask you to go and test what I just said, because I may be lying to you. I mean, I don't think you think I'm lying, but maybe what I'm saying is not correct. So go and find out from your investment advisor if you can, where you can invest the amount of money that is needed in order to remove all that CO2. Answer is not clear. The financial markets are there for greed, as I mentioned before. Nothing wrong with greed, provided it has a positive purpose. But they're not there for the removal of CO2. So the Biden administration, with collaboration from people such as myself, little me, created a proposal that eventually became law. The first proposal was called 45Q. And that proposal was written by me in the year 2019 at the invitation of Senator Whitehouse of Rhode Island, who I recommend because he's very impressive. So he said, what would you do if you had the ability to pass a law on that? And I wrote a proposal. That proposal passed, and it became 45Q. And after that, because of the way it was proposed, was to reward with cash the removal of CO2, but the way it was implemented due to agreements between the Democrats and the Republicans was not cash incentives, it was tax reduction incentives, which the Republicans like. So that first law, 45Q, involves tax reduction, which is only good for people that have a lot of tax, which means the rich. So after that, that law was extended to what is now known as IRA. IRA is, and 45Q are both US laws. 45Q, as I said, involves tax credits. IRA involves cash. How much cash? A lot of money. So the Biden administration has taken this unbelievable step that if you can prove in the right context, legally, that you have removed so many tons of CO2, you will be paid cash, $180 per ton. And this is a real incentive that combines greed with what we need to do, which is to remove CO2. So that's one excellent example. Well, you know what? The US is the first time that the US becomes a leader in legislation in this direction, and it is the law. 45Q is the law, the IRA is the law, and it now has billions of dollars allocated to it by the current administration. We need to take those two laws international, because that's what will allow the scope to make it all happen globally. For the first time, the US can be a leader in creating incentives based on greed, which is a good thing if it is an incentive for removing CO2 of the atmosphere. And we know how much we have to do. So I already told you two things that can be done. What I didn't tell you, and I'm running totally out of time, so I'm just going to tell you what was printed in the New York Times, because some people take that as more current, something that is done today, and not in the year 1997, or even in the year 2019. So this year, the New York Times, Peter Coy actually, printed an article saying that the only thing that will take care of climate change is a well-functioning carbon market. And the carbon market that we have is good because it's the only legislation that has a requirement, legal requirement for removals. And it is by all the nations. Each nation under the carbon market has a limit of how much they can emit. But now, limiting emissions is not enough. Now we have to remove the CO2 which is already there. So for that reason, I have now patented the IP, intellectual property, in the form of a carbon removal market, which now is able to reward the way that IRA and 45Q are already doing the removal of CO2 from the atmosphere. And there are laws that support everything I'm saying. Now, you may say, how does it all come together in the context of the global negotiations, the COP? Yes, it comes together because the 45Q and the IRA can be extended globally to international legislation. How? Through the Convention of the Parties, the COP. Do I have any proof of that? Yes, I was in Dubai recently in COP28, and I spoke with people who can bring the legislation to the attention of the COP29, which is next year. And if it is brought to the attention and the COP29 decides to put it for a vote, it can become international law, particularly if the most resistant of all the nations to help in this direction, which is the United States, has already developed the legislation that we have now in the United States, which is 45Q and IRA, the best and most advanced in the world. In addition, I want you to know it is possible to repeat the incredible performance of the mortgage-backed securities, which are securities that have been created and became runaway success, so much of a runaway success that were dangerous to capital markets. Everybody wanted them. It is possible to use that in the form of not mortgage-backed securities, as it happened in the year 2008, but asset-backed securities where the assets are not mortgages, they are off-takes. This is already also patented. I got this patented so that the US Patent Office has recognized this is innovative, possible, and is supporting the IP, the intellectual property. So this can be done. If we do this, not only could we get support from the US government and perhaps from the international organizations, in this case, the Convention of the Parties 29, but we can also rely on global greed, which is very reliable. It's not that I recommend greed. I want you to understand that it is greed for a good purpose. And if we put all together what I said before, we have water desalination to remove CO2. We have the creation of legislation that in the United States are 45Q and IRA, which means the Inflation Restriction Act, which has, Inflation Reduction Act. We have here a person that can talk to that much better than me because she works in the Biden administration. And I recommend that you hear from her instead of from me. But the Inflation Reduction Act can be extended globally. Will it? I think it could, because the United States can play a very important role in doing that, depending, of course, on the position of the next administration. But I think this can happen. I think it can happen, and I'm going to try to facilitate it. So you already heard it from greed. You heard it from the creation of the carbon removal market, which even the New York Times in 2023 has endorsed in writing, is the solution to climate change. You're now hearing also, not only from that, but from the globalization of the US legislation and from the production of water. We have a number of opportunities. None of them is already in place. Could one of them become a winner? Yes. Could they do it fast enough to take care of the problem before we're all gone? Touch and go. So we don't have a lot of time for this. I wanted to tell you that we don't have a lot of time, but it is possible. And I think the good thing about greed is a fast mechanism. People will go and buy the securities to make money because of greed very quickly. That happened in the year 2008 with respect to mortgage-backed securities, and it can be done for other asset-backed securities that I already mentioned are already patented. With your permission, given that I overextended myself, I will open the floor for questions, and if you ask me a couple of questions, I will be pleased to answer, or I will ask people who know even better than me about the current administration and what can be achieved and what is the realism of what I just mentioned before. So I thank you, and I open the floor for some brief questions. Yes. Yes.
Thank you for describing that.
What's your name first?
My name is Kevin Bueller from McKinsey and Company.
From where?
McKinsey, a consulting firm.
Oh, from McKinsey, sure.
The $180 a ton carbon price you described for extraction of carbon, is that sufficient? So if you had to multiply the impact of carbon removal, what price do you need with current technology to actually make that economic? And what's the overall magnitude that you need to remove 550 gigatons? How many dollars does that translate into at a price that generates a profit and has greed as a motivating force?
Do me a favor, give me your name and your email address, because I'm not good at doing computations standing up with a microphone, particularly when I have a cough. So you send that. But it's not enough. It is an incentive. It is not meant to cover the whole cost of everything. It is, we already have technologies that remove CO2. And I mentioned one, the one that desalinates water, which is profitable. Profitable, okay? We don't need to invent the wheel. This is already profitable. So the question is expanding that. That, therefore, is the answer. We need to expand it. The amount of $180 is just for expansion. And it is possible to expand it enough as needed. Yes, it is possible. The question is how long. That's why I want to involve financial mechanisms, because financial mechanisms are fast. There is nothing faster than greed. Okay, I don't mean to be advocating greed here, but yes, if it works, provided it's not damaging. And I don't think this is damaging. So write to me, and anybody who has any questions, write to me, and I will, I think my email is in the literature for this, right? Yes, is it? Do you know? I don't know. I don't see it. Okay, so is my email in the papers? Is my email provided? We can distribute it later. It has been distributed? Okay, I'm going to provide to anybody who requests my email address, and you can send me the follow-up questions, if that's okay, all right? Yes, and now, if there is no other questions? Yes, there is, very quickly, because we have no time, yes.
So you just mentioned there's actually a business profit in making instilled water, but like how usually do scholarship or government make the big corporates or like business company collaborate with us? Like how do they realize, how can we make them realize that there is a profit in making?
Greed.
Yeah.
In other words, they want to make money. That's why they want to cooperate. So that's what this government decided, that whoever cooperates and removes CO2 is going to get $180 per ton. This is over and above what you sell the CO2 for. So this is how it operates. And financial mechanisms work extremely well. And if you don't know the history, go back to 2008 and look at asset-backed securities. It was a runaway market. It's something that can be repeated now. And in fact, it was done with mortgage-backed securities, and now we have patented securities that are not based on mortgage, that are based on offtakes. And offtakes are an instrument that is used in the process of producing or removing actually CO2. So this can be done, yes.
Thank you.
There was another question, and that was the last, yes. I can't hear you, sorry. I can't hear you.
You mentioned there's a financial incentive to cooperate with, to do this environment water desalination, but is it enough to compare? Because when you put it into a financial market, it competes with other alternatives.
Is it enough what?
There's not enough incentive to compete with other financial incentive with other, it's in a free market, right? So if you want to do something consistent like water desalination and the environmental change, it is not enough to put it with greed into a financial competing environment, and you need a more consistent governmental approach to regulate or to ensure that this process, this business will continue even if there are no financial approach or financial incentives.
I sympathize. What's your name?
Anthony.
Huh?
Anthony.
Anthony, I sympathize with your position. To the extent that climate change is already happening and a lot of people are being affected, then yes, it is true that government action is required to protect people from the consequences of their own actions. And yes, that's what the law is about. And it's happening. Is it happening soon enough? No. Is it happening big enough? No, but it's already starting to happen. So what we need is to work on what we have. And I think, in addition to that, innovative instruments that allow people who invest, private investors, to invest in ESG opportunities are key because they are voluntary. They are not forced by governments. Is that going to be sufficient? I don't know, but it will help. So what are those? At present, if you go to an investment manager and you ask them, if I give you $1 million, do you know how to invest my money in an ESG opportunity? If they are truthful, they will say, no, we don't know. So we need to create those opportunities. For that reason is that I patented this new type of security, which is asset-backed. And we know those are the securities that are preferred by investors and are runaway in terms of demand. So we can create financial instruments that have the property that provide profits and returns to the investor. How much money is it in investment for these opportunities, private investment? It's called, what we're looking for is a number that professors like me tell the students is called dry powder. Just look at anybody who does financial markets. What is dry powder? Dry powder is expressions from clients to want to buy certain securities that have not been realized. That's why it's called dry powder. The data shows that, in fact, McKinsey, somebody said was from McKinsey. The data of McKinsey shows that there is a huge amount of dry powder. And my data from teaching students at Columbia University is that there is $4 trillion in dry powder, which are not being invested for the lack of well-defined financial instruments. So there is something we can do along the lines I just explained. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.